Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today. As you all know, I like to travel around the state, interview some people, find out what's happening in our state. Today, I'm in Baton Rouge with State Rep Jack McFarland, District 13. We'll bring him on here in just a second, but before we do that, I want to tell you there's some really good things to see in this video, as I like to say with all of them. But, I personally am not a tax person, but you might have heard there's a gas tax being proposed. You might have actually heard about one, but there's actually a couple other ones. We might dabble on those just a second, but the most important one is the one that Jack McFarland is bringing up, and I want people to have the chance to listen to it, to hear more about it, and who knows, maybe even if you don't like the tax, you might like some of the things that he's got involved with it that are improvements for our state, and we might have to keep that on the back burner some way or another, but the most important thing is getting the information out here. Jack, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, William.
I appreciate it. Well, tell me something. Where exactly is your district? If you could paint some borders for people to get an idea where is it?
I would say just below I-20, but above Alexandria.
Okay.
I'm in the very center to north part of our state. It's all part of the Kisatchie National Forest.
Okay.
So if you've ever traveled Highway 167 to Louisiana Tech, then you've driven through my district.
Okay. I love Kisatchie. I've actually hiked there a couple times.
Well, it's got some beautiful country there, tremendous opportunities for recreation. So we call it the outdoorsman state for a reason.
So what makes up your district primarily? What industry makes up your area?
So the number one industry in my district is timber. We have one paper mill, 5 sawmills. We do have part of the Haynesville Shale, so it does contribute. We have the largest natural gas taverns in the state and the second largest in the country in my district in Bienville Parish. So it's kind of diverse, but the number one industry is timber.
So what's your background before you ran for state rep?
So I own a timber company, logging crews, and I've been a small business owner since 1997. I've owned everything from dry cleaners to laundromats to timber to logging companies. I own dump trucks, construction crew, tire shop. So I've just anything small business. I've always been an entrepreneur. Prior to that, I worked for 2 large corporations. One, the largest private corporation, was Martin Timber Company, Royal Martin. And then I also worked for Georgia Pacific for several years in the plywood and sawmill area.
I like that. What I like about that is that because you're a small businessman and you've had several businesses like that, and you've not only been involved in the community, but it sounds to me like that's some of those good qualifications that I like that a state representative has, because it makes you more connected to not only the community, but as a business person coming to our capital, it almost makes you inclined to run our government like it was a business.
It does. And look, I had no ambitions to ever be involved in state government. I had no ambition to be in local government. But part of my interaction with the locals, and especially in my dry cleaners, that's how I got involved. I started serving on the Chamber of Commerce. I was the chairman of the Ducks Unlimited and other things, but I ended up running for police jury. I was elected parish president at the very first meeting I ever attended.
What parish?
Wynn Parish.
Okay.
And that was in 2008. And ironically, I was the only Republican. There were 7 members, 7 police jurors, 6 Democrats, 1 Republican. They elected me to be the president at the first meeting. And I was also the youngest juror in the room. But it was a very challenging time. We had some tremendous deficits in our parish. Some impropriety had occurred in our local government. So, we had to gain the public's trust and clean up a mess. And we did that and gained the public's trust. And the public liked so much what we did that within 4 or 5 years, people were asking me to run for state government. Our state representative was terming out. And so I threw my name in the hat, and here 2 terms later, I'm back here still serving. And now I'm serving as chairman of Ag, and I'm proud to represent District 13.
I like that, chairman of Ag. I've had Mike Strain on before.
Yeah.
I like some of the things that agriculture does for our state. I don't think people the people, of course, those agricultural districts realize it, but that's not where the population is. The population, being down south, a lot of people, think it's oil and gas, but they don't realize how much agriculture makes up. How much does agriculture, percentage-wise, make up for our state?
So I can give you an example for timber. Timber is the largest agricultural product in the state. Often people don't recognize that. They believe it's corn or soybean or cotton, but corn and soybean and cotton are some of our largest exporting products that we utilize the Mississippi River for. Specifically the Port of New Orleans and the Port of Baton Rouge. So ag and forestry is the second largest revenue generator for the state, only behind oil and gas. But I tell everyone, timber being the number one row crop generates about $15 billion for the state every year.
Wow, I think Mike Strain alluded to that, but I haven't gotten an updated number on it. That's pretty impressive when you think about it.
It's a significant amount of money that it helps generate. Now that's gross revenue that flows through the state, for all the way from timber sales to timber products to contractors to employees. So it plays a significant role.
And when you look at that number, that large number, sorry I interrupted you. Okay. But when you look at that large number of what the crop is, or what the amount of timber work, it doesn't really take too much notice of all the jobs that creates. I mean, a lot of people focus on that. What I'm trying to say, another way of saying that is, a lot of people focus on that number, but they don't realize that there's probably ancillary numbers along with it for all the jobs that it creates. If a timber company is doing work in an area, there's other businesses that are supported by the people who have the jobs.
Of course,
do you see that a lot?
It is. Look, I often tell everyone they don't recognize, or actually most of them just don't realize the significance that one industry plays in multiple facets of business. You take the convenience stores that all my truck drivers stop at. You take the parts places that we buy parts from. You take the equipment dealers that we buy equipment from. The tire shops that we buy.
Right.
It all works together to produce a stable economy in Central Louisiana, and more importantly for the state.
So I want to ask you. I want to give you a chance. I want to have some time to open this up, and look into it about the gas tax. So you propose a gas tax this year. I would like for you to explain to everybody about that.
So let me begin, William, by saying, first of all, I'm the guy that was probably the most vocal against a gas tax my first term. I truly respected Representative Steve Carter. He did a very good job of creating the conversation about need for infrastructure. But why did I get involved? Look, as a business owner, I recognize the cost that we are losing in this state by not investing in our infrastructure. Giving you a small example, for me to get my product from point A to point B, I have to travel, say, 30 miles. You close one bridge, now I have to travel 60 miles. Well, I don't get to adjust. There's no rate for me.
Right.
There's nowhere for me to adjust that cost, that additional cost, and it is significant. To give you an example, one job I had personally, that's a true story, 30 miles, went to 60 miles. My cost went up by $2,500 that week. Now, the other reason I couldn't ever support a gas tax was because we weren't reforming how we're currently doing business. So I've had problems just like many others, and as I've traveled the state, I continue to hear not everyone's happy with DOTD. They want more efficiency. How are we spending the money now that we got? Well, first of all, let's go back. In 1984, our gas tax moved up from 8 cents to 16. Now, in 1984, I could buy a piece of bubble gum for 1 cent. Okay. Today, you can't buy one piece of bubble gum for 15 cents.
Okay.
And that's before you put taxes on it. So I don't care who you are, you're not doing business today with 16 cents the way you were in 1984. So no one can argue that money just doesn't go as far as it did in 1984. And think about that. That's nearly 40 years ago.
Right.
So, we recognize that. Now, I introduced this bill because I added some reform to it. I want us to cap DOTD spending where it's currently at.
But this is important. I want to stress this. Not to interrupt you on this, but I really want the listeners to listen, to take notice of this, that you're not just asking for money without offering reform.
That's right.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure I talked to you about this, because you're not just saying, hey, we're going to tax. You're saying we want reform tied to this.
We do. So, as a member of appropriations, I learned quickly that we don't get a say-so legislatively in the budget of DOTD, because their budget is solely funded by the Transportation Trust Fund. So, as a legislator, we don't get to say anything about it. All other agencies in the state have to come before the legislature if they want to increase revenue or expenditures in their budget, except for DOTD. So, one of my first proposals was, let's stop that. Let's cap their spending at its current level. It's currently consuming 5 cents of the 16 cents in its operations. Let's cap that. If they need more money, we're not saying we wouldn't give it to them.
Right.
We just want you to come before the legislature, explain why you need this revenue, where you're going to spend it, just like every other agency.
I think our state police, you said every other agency, I think our state police have to do that. I think they were here last session, about having some additional money. So again, to your point, it does kind of make common sense that if, let's say, a division like the state police, for our safety, has to come and ask for more money, the roads that we're driving on should have to too.
That's exactly right. And the other part of that is we wanted to do an audit. Our DOTD is audited annually. It's just a general audit like many other agencies. But what we want to do is a more in-depth audit of the existing revenue, but any new revenue. And then we want to take those findings and present them to an advisory group or a committee, if you want to call it that, made up of private citizens, of business owners, and of legislators. We want those audit findings to be a recommendation of efficiencies that they believe should occur within DOTD. And then the committee or the advisory group would make recommendations for legislative change to the legislature or to the governor's administration. And even a lot of these things could be changed administratively without legislation, without new laws.
Right.
That's when you start actually really controlling government, is when you start to be able to correct things that are wrong within an agency without having to pass new laws. So the audit is a significant piece, and we also want transparency. Where is our money going? And I mean, how much does it cost to fix a road? When you're going to fix my road?
Right.
So in the state of Texas,
what does this have to do with there's a trust fund, I think, that also funds DOTD?
It does. So traditionally, DOTD has been funded by the Transportation Trust Fund. That's where the 16 cents goes. 3 years ago, we put out a constitutional amendment that over 90% of the voters voted for and approved, and that is called the Transportation Subfund. And what it said is any revenue placed in the Transportation Subfund could only be spent on preservation and construction of roads and bridges. And it could not, specifically says it cannot be spent on employees' cost or benefits. So traditionally, the Transportation Trust Fund now has been paying for employees' cost. That was not the intention. In 1984, the Transportation Trust Fund was for roads and bridges. But in 1991, the Attorney General said you could use Transportation Trust Fund to pay employee cost. So, that's one of those things that I wish we could go back and change.
Right.
And you say, well, why can't you? Well, you're talking about $250, $350 million. And you just don't find that in our budget. And so, this is, it's like I found this and I inherited this problem, and I want to fix the problem, but it's going to take a concerted effort by everyone and some sacrifice by all, including me as a business owner. I'll tell you, I buy over $30,000 worth of fuel a month, and I know what this fuel revenue increase could.
So how much of a percentage is gas tax?
So what we're doing is we're asking for 10 cents the first year.
Okay.
And then every other year for 10 years, we'll increase it by 2 cents. So at the end of a 12-year period, we will have indexed up 22 cents. Now, where did we get that number? If you would have taken the original 16 cents with a rate of inflation, if we'd have done a CPI index like most states, and we didn't, Once again, something else we didn't.
Imagine that, Louisiana not
Yeah.
doing something that.
Once again, we failed to do something correctly. So if we'd have indexed the original 16 cents today, it would be worth 38 cents. Now, obviously, no one, including me, would like, I don't think it's fair to the public that you just come out and put that burden on them immediately. So our proposal was, let's phase it in. And the reason for the initial 10 cents is because what most of the public doesn't realize, when you go buy a gallon of gas, 18 cents is federal dollars. That's a federal tax. Every state has the opportunity to get their 18 cents back off of each gallon, but you have to have matching dollars from the state to get it. Now, Louisiana doesn't always have the matching dollars. So
Okay.
that's 18 cents of our tax dollars we're paying to the federal government that are ending up in another state because some other state has matching dollars. And to give you an example, the state of Arkansas passed a half-cent sales tax, increased their revenue. Now they're getting other states' federal dollars that didn't have the matching dollars. So, we're just missing these opportunities.
So wait, you're saying Louisiana's missing out once again on something because people in the past haven't had forward thinking?
That's exactly right.
Now, I love this, and I want to point this out too, is that keep in mind, we're talking about all of these positive things, that our government could be doing or should have been doing in the past, while we're talking about a gas tax that's not going to be real popular with people when the gas is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd also like to point out your way of thinking that that this bill will tie it to reform, to reform some of this money, where it's been, where it's going, and how it's spent, but all of that is being done through the gas tax. Is there a way, I'm just throwing this out there, because I know one of my listeners that's going to ask me this question, is there a way to maybe separate the two and have create the reform without having to create the gas tax?
Okay,
or is
so
there something with the funding that makes it necessary?
the funding is a necessary part of it. To do the reforms, you've got to have the funding. Because one of the other pieces of the reform that I want to do is I want to take 4 cents of our existing 16, because that is less than 4 cents is actually even going to the roads today. Only about 3 cents of our current gas tax is actually making it to our roads.
And it was sold to us, that tax in the past was sold to us to fix our roads and bridges, correct?
That's right. So what I want to do is take 4 cents of the existing. I want to take 3 cents now. I want to go back in 3 years, give DOTD an opportunity through attrition or however to find efficiencies in their agency, take 1 penny back from them. 1 penny equals $30 million. So I want to take 4 cents, move into the transportation subfund so that they can never be misspent again. I want to put them in that transportation subfund that is constitutionally protected. It's a statutory dedicated fund so that we can't grow government. Because that's what happens. If you increase new revenue through a gas tax,
Right.
then the existing gas tax could be consumed by an agency and just grow government. Well, I want to prevent that. As a conservative, I don't want to grow government. I'm
Right.
for limited government.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
But I'm for a government that can provide the services that we demand. As a business owner, I want an opportunity to grow my business, as any business owner would want. So what we have as a challenge in the state is we have businesses. People always say, well, how come we don't get new businesses? Look, we're barely holding on to businesses we have now.
Right. But there's a lot of people leaving the state. When we talk about people leaving the state, because we have an outward migration of our population and trying to bring business back in. But when somebody leaves, maybe we don't relate it to jobs or we don't relate it to a business. But, there's a lot of those people that are entrepreneurs. Maybe they have a small business. Maybe they could have started a business, but going to another state gives them an opportunity. How is this gas tax going to give people here those opportunities while they're paying more money at the pump?
So, for one example, if you ask anyone, especially business owners, what are we doing wrong? Well, I'll give an example. I had a plumber come by my office since I started this proposal. He said, Jack, I used to do 5 visits a day. I would go to 5 jobs a day as a small business owner, one single plumber. He said, but because of the closed bridges and the roads and the traffic, he said, now I'm only able to do 2. Some days I can do 3. I said, well, what has that done to your business? He said, well, I'm not making as much money and then the jobs I do go to, I've raised the cost. So now you're paying more for that plumber to come provide a service because he didn't have the efficiency of the roads for him to get to your place of your home or business or whatever. I had a florist come to me. He said, I can no longer get flowers from my shop to a homeowner or to a business or to a funeral home or to a church because he's also having the same thing. He's having to increase the cost of delivery because of the poor roads and bridges. So we're paying for our poor roads and bridges more than just at the pump. We're paying for it in the goods and services that we're buying every day. It's just those are the hidden costs, not including the maintenance. The average cost of maintenance on a car in Louisiana is $1,200, more than any other state.
Well, and some of that's because we have bad
roads. We're damaging our cars. So any of these things we do to reduce that, I think is a positive for us, and I think that people will see that return on their investment. And you say, well, Jack, how are you going to get a return on your investment on gas? Well, when you reduce the time that you're sitting in traffic, you reduce the time, the cost of goods and services being provided to you because now you've invested in the infrastructure and you've reduced the amount of time it takes them to get the product to you. You've also reduced your expenses. And one thing we hadn't talked about, one of the big debates during tort reform was our poor roads and our poor bridges. And that has led to a lot of the high settlements in court cases involving auto accidents. So we say, well, we experience higher insurance premiums because we have poor roads and bridges. It's a fact. Insurance companies will tell you. So there's a lot of good things that can come out of it, but as a conservative, I want to make sure we do it correctly. I believe we all agree at some point we've got to address our infrastructure in this state.
So something else that comes to mind is that when if you're asking people to pay a tax, pay more money, is there a guarantee of a certain amount of money that's going to go, or a certain percentage of this money is going to go to bridge projects, road projects, or is it just saying that, okay, we're going to tax you this and that money is going to be directed into a fund to fund these projects, but it's not going to guarantee any particular projects? Is there a way to say, this percentage has to be used on the repaving of rural roads, or this money has to be used, a percentage of this goes towards bridges?
Yes.
Is there a way to dedicate that?
So what we did, we're proposing to take 60% of this revenue, of the old revenue as well as the new revenue, and put toward preservation of our roads and bridges.
Is that going to be more than 60%? You said 60% of the old revenue and new. Is that combined? Okay,
combined. We're going to take 60% of the old 4 cents of the 4 cents we're putting in the sub fund, and the new 22 over the course of 12 years. All that would go. 60% of that would go to preservation and construction of existing roads and bridges. Now, 40% would go to new capacity projects. And you say, how did you get the 60-40 split? Well, DOTD has what was established, and it was created to take the politics out of picking the winners and losers in this state, because that's how politics works in Louisiana. We created the Highway Priority Program, and it's data driven. It's based on the number of miles of roads in a district or a parish. It's based on the population, the amount of traffic. So there's things that are data driven that drives where the investment would take place. But we have a $15 billion backlog for preservation of roads and bridges in Louisiana. We have a $12 billion new capacity. Well, what is new capacity? New capacity is like the Baton Rouge Bridge.
Yeah, right behind us.
And you have the Calcasieu River Bridge. You have the widening of Interstate 12 to the Mississippi line. You have port projects and port entrances that need improving in New Orleans. You have interstate lighting in New Orleans. You have other things. And look, what we did is we picked and looked at each region and identified the new capacity projects that would make the most significant infrastructure investment and economic opportunities in those regions. And we focused on those. Those also have a large federal dollars return. So when I say that, that gives us the greatest opportunity to take our dollars go get federal dollars, bring it back, and utilize it to increase our opportunity for investment.
It's the matching funds that the federal government puts in. If we're taxing this, the federal government's going to give us a matching amount.
Well, even better, if for an example on the interstate, if we put up 10%, they'll send 90%.
Really?
Now think about that, and we're missing that opportunity. On a state highway, if we put up 20%, they'll put up 80%. Now, we have these opportunities.
Yeah.
And we're not doing it. So as a business owner, look, it's common sense to me. If I told you that if you give me $10, I'll give you back $100, you're gonna
all day long.
Yeah, you're gonna do that. But that's what we're not doing in Louisiana. So you say, well, how have we been doing it? Well, we've been robbing Peter to pay Paul. We go to our capital outlay budget, and we take no less than 35% of all our capital outlay dollars, and we go try to get that federal money and use it on our highway priority program. Well, you said, well, what's wrong with that, Jack? Well, capital outlay, once again, this is Louisiana.
Right.
Capital outlay was not intended to be used for highway, roads, and bridges. Capital outlay was created for infrastructure such as water. We all know the challenges we got in every community, metropolitan or rural.
Yeah.
Sewer. Once again, you recognize the challenges in metropolitan and rural areas with sewer. Deferred maintenance on our college campuses, deferred maintenance in our buildings. So just the list goes on. And think about it. We hear the numbers of $342 million in deferred maintenance in our college campuses. And you wonder why college cost is so high? You wonder why tuition is so high?
Right, that's one of those.
Because it's a hidden cost. We're not investing into fixing our buildings because we're using that money for other things. So once again, and I call it robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
We're just doing an injustice to the taxpayers because we just continue down this. And look, I can sit here and say I'm not doing anything. I don't want to. That's a very big political risk. Why would you do that? Well, the people in District 13, William, they didn't elect me to come down here and just say, well, this is a good old boy's way.
Go along to get along.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. And look, so maybe I don't have the right plan. Maybe my plan isn't the perfect plan. But at least I'm having a conversation.
Exactly.
And I'm not hiding it from the public. I've had these conversations on Facebook, and I've been very upfront with everyone. This is a proposal. If you have ideas, tell me. If you have suggestions, look, if you're against it, tell me, it's fine.
So if people do want to have some conversation with you, do you have a Facebook page or a website page that you want to give out so people can have that feedback?
I have my state representative, Jack McFarland, Facebook page, and I have videos on there where we've been talking about this whole plan for probably the last 9-10 weeks. So go back and watch all the videos. I think there's maybe 10 or 12 videos available right now. And it gives everyone an explanation of what our goals are and what we're trying to accomplish. I mean, it goes into the details of, the projects, the audits. It talks about the transparency piece. Look, maximizing all of our dollars to bring back our federal dollars. It talks about the reform to stop spending capital outlay incorrectly. Think about something, William. If we're spending $150 to $250 million a year in capital outlay on roads, and we stop doing that because we fund them correctly,
right,
then you have the opportunity to see investment in every area of the state in water, sewer. I mean, every part of the state has a technical college or community college. They have higher ed. I mean, you got a university just about in every metropolitan region, and every one of them have needs. So could we potentially reduce our tuition cost? Well, sure, if we stop requiring our universities to spend tuition on maintenance that the state is actually responsible for,
then they're not going to be kicking that bill back to the people.
That's
in their
exactly
tuition.
right.
I am going to tell you, and daggone it, Jack, you're making me like this idea.
Look,
I always say I'm not a tax guy. I don't like taxes, but what I do like about this is the spirit of reform and something we haven't talked about, which is everybody likes to talk about jobs, bringing jobs to Louisiana, bringing jobs, and they think of bringing jobs to Louisiana as we're going to create a better tax system, or we're going to tax people less, or tax businesses less. We're going to offer these incentives, but nobody really stresses the infrastructure. Some do, but nobody really talks about, to have a business, a big business that has to bring in trucks or have to bring in people, they need good roads and bridges. So is this kind of ties in with the whole, when our infrastructure is good and the tax environment is good, we can bring in business and industry. So how does your tax bill, address that?
It does. So look, just take for an example.
Not that I didn't answer the question kind of already, but
no, but you did.
Yeah.
But you take the port of New Orleans for an example. I know you're from the Metairie area, Jefferson.
I was in Port Fourchon yesterday.
So, well, you take the port of New Orleans. Most people don't recognize how much product, when you're talking about agricultural product, how much corn comes out of that port to go to throughout the world. It's $100 billion business. Now that's coming out of that port. Now, how is that port funded? Through a road tax. And you say, wait a minute, my gas taxes help fund ports, airports, and railroad. Once again, those are three things have not made significant investment in. Now you see a new airport in New Orleans, but you say, Jack, how would a water port investment in New Orleans or Baton Rouge, why would somebody in North Louisiana care about that? Well, so when we have businesses that want to invest, especially European businesses that want to build in North Louisiana, where our largest ag product is timber, where do they export that from? From New Orleans and Baton Rouge. So if I can't get that new company from Europe, help them get their product to the port of Baton Rouge or New Orleans, well, you got to have adequate ports, you got to have entrances, you got to have all the necessary infrastructure in place. That's how we create jobs. It's working hand in hand. This isn't just about the metropolitan areas. It's not just about a rural area. Look, take me. I come from a parish that's got less than 15,000 people. But I also have more roads and bridges than any other district in the state.
Right.
So I recognize the cost and the contributions that come from that. So it's still, once again, it's a challenge, but I believe that if you sit down with the public and you're honest, and that's all I've been from the very beginning. That's why I did the videos. That's why I've told everyone about it. That's why I've asked for input, even if it's criticism. William, you and I can disagree about things, but we can do it respectively.
Absolutely.
And look, you may even have a suggestion. Now look, I'm going to tell you, back in 1982, Ronald Reagan was in office, and we all idolized Ronald Reagan as a Republican.
A conservative. Yeah.
But he passed and increased the federal gas tax coming out of the Carter administration. And you say, why did he do that? Because he recognized, and he said the best way to stimulate our economy nationally was to invest in infrastructure. Well, where do you get that revenue? Well, he raised the federal gas tax.
It's almost like paying a toll.
It is.
You pay a toll to have a better bridge.
That's right.
You pay a toll to have a better road. You go down Florida and they have tolls all over the place. But you look at Florida, how great their infrastructure is. Every citizen's paying a little bit of money here and there, but they're having better transportation. They've got better connections. So I'm seeing the beauty of the reform part and requiring the tax to go towards not only improvement but for reform. When you drive through, especially your neck of the woods, or Clutcherville, Natchitoches, Shreveport, wherever. You have these areas where they're very rural, where you're going down a bad road and you see all these abandoned. I was going through Bogalusa just a few weeks ago, and you're going down a highway. There's all these abandoned buildings on the side, but the road is horrible. And I guess you could think of it this way: if a project or this capital outlay is used on these roads, we might have businesses moving into those empty buildings. And from out of town and places to be able to help create some more jobs.
Yeah, we're never going to bring great economic opportunities to our state, but more specifically bringing higher wage earning jobs to Louisiana. How do you do that? Well, I'm going to give you an example. 2 years ago, Alabama elected a new governor, correct? First thing she did, now she ran on a base that said, I will not raise a tax. In the first
Oh.
10 days of her office, she, along with the Republican legislature, said, we got a problem. And they passed a new gas tax. And today, look at Alabama. They have 3 brand new automobile plants that are building and have been built in Alabama because of their investment in infrastructure. Look at what's happening in our neighboring state, Mississippi. They have, not only do they have a gas tax, but they also took their lottery proceeds and their sports wagering proceeds and then put in infrastructure. Now they're also gaining more economic opportunities through factories coming in and being built. And right now, Mississippi even has a time project worth about $4 or $5 billion moving through the legislature, where they're going to pass another tax and borrow money and pay it back to do all this infrastructure investment. Arkansas is doing the same thing, Texas. But you brought up tolls, and let me touch on that. Everyone says, well, why can't we build a bridge with a toll? Because it doesn't generate enough to pay for the bridge.
Well, not only that, but not to interrupt you on that, but what I always see happen when there's a toll on a bridge, is generally speaking, then they start having a department, for that bridge. Then they have a little police officer, and then they may need 2 police officers, and then they have a wrecker, and then the toll ends up, like you said, not all going to the bridge. It ends up going towards, a new police department. Now, that works on the causeway in New Orleans because that they really spend a lot of time putting maintenance and improving that bridge. So that's actually, I would say, a good example of a toll on a bridge. But you're right, to your point, oftentimes the toll doesn't always get rededicated there.
Well, I've even been asked why don't we use what do other states use for their roads? Well, every state's been different. And I'm going to give you an example. In Texas, they have a sales tax that goes to roads. They have a gas tax that goes to roads. They have property taxes that goes to roads, and they have tolls that go to roads.
We don't have.
We have basically, other than the causeway, we pretty much have one tax going to roads, with the exception of that capital outlay that we're taking that should not be taken and being spent on roads. That money's coming out of that was actually created. That capital outlay fund was created to spend money for water, sewer, and deferred maintenance and other things. But what I've told you about with Mississippi, Arkansas, everybody's doing something. Now, look, Louisiana, we already have a high sales tax. Well, it's the locals that have a high sales tax, not our state. Our state is actually really low on the sales tax spectrum, but the locals, when you include it, is high. Well, we also have some of the lowest property taxes in the country. So, no one wants to pay more property tax for an automobile. So the only other place to get it is the roads and the gas. And if you say, well, why the gas? Well, that's the ones that's using it.
Right.
But we also did put something in there for electric vehicles because every electric vehicle doesn't pay a gas tax. So they've had free rides on our roads. So we did put a provision for an annual fee, like every other state has, to assess electric and hybrid automobiles. So, look, I think we've done a good job, but a lot of the things that I've adjusted in my piece of legislation that I'm working on have come from the public, and just like conversations we're having right now. I take all those suggestions, we sit down with our staff, and we go through them, and if we find something that we can do and it works, we're going to do it. I mean, we're not limiting ourselves. We're open to everything.
And I want to point out too, you've talked about the states around us, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, that all have a great infrastructure system. And we're watching everybody leave our state. We're not going to see a good opportunity to come here. It's almost kind of like, was it a law of attraction, or magnets kind of thing. If they're building their infrastructure, making it better, no wonder they're drawing people out, of our state. Now, I'm not saying I'm for a tax, but I am saying that this sounds like good common sense, the idea that could come out of this. And I'd like to actually, encourage everybody to go to your site, about that, because with that in mind, people can start to see the beauty of the infrastructure project in this, and really investigate this more. So this, this discussion isn't going to stop here. this is just the beginning of it. And I want to remind everybody, you can go to legis.la.gov and you can watch the committees on this.
Yes.
And see more about this. I have two more questions for you though. See more out of this and read up on it through your site and watch it in committee and watch what happens. So the budget right now for the state is about $50 billion. If I'm not,
it's a little over $30 billion now.
I'm sorry. There's another. I'm having the number. I'm getting the numbers confused on something else, which I'm going to go back to. I probably thank you for correcting me. Which is there's another $8 billion that's coming in off of federal money from COVID into our budget.
Yes, and
that's going to increase it to
up to about 35 to 38 billion is what we're estimating now. But now that could be for 1 year because you're only going to see that, like $3 billion that we've found out we were going to receive from the federal stimulus. So that'll only be accounted for this year.
I might be getting it confused with the number. That might be a more updated number from what I had heard a while back.
Okay.
So, but to your point though, can some of that money be used on some of these infrastructure projects, on one-time money instead of using that money that's coming in on recurring government or growing government?
So
to help ease maybe the tax a little bit.
So we've asked that same question, and actually, thankfully, our congressmen are working with the administration, the Biden administration, to find out if they can do that, if we can utilize some of it for infrastructure projects. That was not, as I appreciate it, that was not the intention of that. That was to stimulate. That was to go toward like our unemployment trust fund that we know has been depleted of $1 billion. Mm-hmm. It was to go toward higher education. It was toward to help the local governments that have lost revenue and had additional costs associated with COVID. It was to go to our K through 12 and as well as the state on additional costs. But you also think about the health hospitals and their additional costs. So we really don't know how all the money can be spent yet. We continue to get every day new guidelines of how that revenue can be spent because it is one-time money. And I caution everyone, with that, I want to remind you, today was joint budget, and we received our 5-year baseline revenue estimating committee projections. So next year, Louisiana is projected to have a $962 million deficit.
For next year?
For next year.
Now 2021 or 2022?
2022. So I'm cautious to everyone that just because we received all this federal stimulus, we have to be very cautious in our spending and where those dollars are spent. We need to make sure we utilize them in the most efficient way we can to make the best investment now. So
what's that deficit number again?
$962 million.
Can some of this federal money coming in be okay?
You can't use it for your budget deficit. You can't use it for reducing taxes or credits or deductions. So it's like I said, they put some pretty stringent guidelines.
And all this comes at a time when I did this in another video. All this comes at a time when I know that that you guys are going to have to start talking about paying the government back for that $1 billion loan, for coastal restoration that came up that was created during the Jindal administration. I'm not poking, poking any trying to poke a bear. I'm saying that's when it was created during the Jindal administration, and that now Louisiana has to start paying that money. Is it this year or next year? And if they don't, that $1 billion loan turns into a $3 billion loan?
That's correct. So what happened was our congressional leaders, and during the Jindal administration, we had a $3 billion, that was our share of the new levies for Louisiana, for the Orleans area and all that. But we were looking at $3 billion. The congressional delegation went and sat down with President Trump, worked with FEMA and the Corps of Engineers. Anyways, they reduced that to 1.3 billion, which that's great, but we have 3 years to pay it. So what the proposal is currently by the administration, governor's administration, is to borrow $400 million. We have to pay it by September.
Yeah.
And every year for the next 3 years, borrow $400 million, bond it out, pay it back over the next 20 years. Where's that money come from? I mean,
yeah, Yeah.
Somebody's got to pay it back.
So now we're robbing Peter to pay Paul again. Because we're borrowing money to pay back a loan, and we're going to pay more and hope to save a little interest on what we're borrowing, or hope to borrow enough money to pay that, and hope that the interest isn't more than what we'd be paying to the federal government.
That's exactly right. So, look, once again, I say this, when I say we backed ourselves into a corner, I wasn't here during those administrations, but I'm the one here now tasked with helping to find a solution. And it's not going to be an easy solution. For me, I mean, we know because of some of the dollars that was invested last year by the federal government that was sent toward Louisiana, that we're going to have about a $298 million surplus going into this year. Well, one of my recommendations was, why don't we take, we can't.
So a surplus now, but next year we're going to have a deficit.
That's right.
Okay,
but we have a surplus coming into this year simply because of the federal stimulus dollars that were invested in Louisiana. So why not take that $298 million and go to capital outlay, take $100 million of that. I mean, that's investment into infrastructure.
Exactly.
And put it with it, and you don't have to borrow the $400 million this year.
Pay the loan off with money you've got, and then your tax, not trying to sell a tax, but then take your tax and use that for those infrastructure projects.
That's right. And then that frees up $150 to $250 million in capital outlay. So we have an opportunity to fix this and the right to ship, but it's going to take some concerted effort and a willingness by the public to step back. And look, it's very difficult, William, for the public. Look, I've been here 6 years
exactly,
to learn all this. 6 years. And I got to explain it to the public and get them to understand and convince them that this is the best thing for them. And I got to do that in the next 30 minutes or the next 30 days.
Right.
It's a significant challenge.
Right.
But you want to know why a business guy would do this? That's why. Because this is what we do every day as business people. We take on challenges and we come up with real solutions. But we also reach out to others and we tell them, hey, we know we got a problem. Now, don't come to me with another problem, just come to me with a solution to the problem. And that's where we're at. And look, I accept the challenge and I look forward to it. I would never do anything that would harm my constituents or yours. But I do. It's been a challenge, but I've been up for the task so far.
And what I like something you said, and again, this is not me trying to sell the idea. This is just simply me seeing the reasoning behind here. Is that, like you say, you're a businessman. Just as a businessman, oftentimes has to make a decision, to try to save, or they try to save money with their business. To see how they get their net profits up. They also understand the need for investment. They also need that sometimes you have to spend some money on advertising. You got to buy a better warehouse. You got to buy a better truck. You got to buy better equipment. You have to invest some money, and of course, to make money, you got to spend money to make money, and that's kind of what this gas tax you're saying is.
Well, think about it. If you increase the amount of revenue going toward infrastructure, that creates jobs in Louisiana. Now, this is the only tax proposal where you actually see a return on your investment. Think about it.
Because we get that federal money.
Because you get that federal money. So if we put up, for an example, we have the potential to put up $300 million this year and go get $780 million. Now, every one of us would be wanting to do that. But that is what it's going to take to, one, fix the backlog. I mean, we can all drive around. We recognize 40 years since we've made any significant investment in our roads and bridges. But you're going to, at a time coming out of COVID, there's some uncertainty. You could help stabilize Louisiana's economy by investing in its infrastructure, creating an opportunity for more businesses to come in, and not just that, but keep the businesses we currently have, assure that they're going to be here, but also provide a better way of living. Think about how many hours a day people sit in traffic in the metropolitan areas.
Oh, wow.
I don't see it as much, but look, what I do see in the rural areas, and this is the best comparison I can give you. So in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, you sit in line in traffic. In rural Louisiana, we drive miles and miles around closed bridges to get home.
I didn't realize that. So I got one last question for you. We'll end it on this, which is this tax bill. You're saying, we see all this, we're going to spend this much money, or we're going to tax people this much money. They're going to bring this much money in for the tax, and the federal government's going to match it. Now there's this big old pot of money. This bill is going to secure that money for roads and bridges, and it's secured in a way that's not through reform, that it will not be able to be used on new cars for some other project, or for some other pet project for anybody.
So my answer to that is the public ensured that was going to be protected 3 years ago when you voted on the constitutional amendment that says we want to create a transportation subfund that says any money, existing revenue or new revenue, that goes into the fund can only be used for preservation and construction of roads and bridges and not employees' cost. So that means we can't use it on cars, can't use it on trucks, can't use it on salaries, can't use it on retirement. We can only use it to build and preserve roads and bridges.
Wow.
Now that was the foresight by the public. The legislature put it out there. The public agreed, hey, we want this. We want responsible government. That's what we all wanted. But now I'm asking the public to look, let's take some of our existing transportation trust fund dollars, your taxes you're already paying, let's put some of that in there. It's only 4 cents, it's not enough. Let's put the new revenue in there with it, protect it, because once we put the 4 cents in there, you can't take it back out.
Okay.
Because now it's protected constitutionally. But that's the great thing about it, is that it was created by the public.
I like that. Well, Jack, thank you so much for coming on today and doing this. I hope everybody to share the video and get this information out there. And Jack McFarland on your website, you said on your Facebook page,
State Representative.
State Representative page, they can see more of that.
Yes.
And they can ask more questions about that. Anything else that you want to say real quick? Anything?
No, look, it's a privilege, William, and I appreciate you coming all the way up to Baton Rouge and at least taking the time to have a conversation. Whether you support or don't support, at least you have gained knowledge and you
Absolutely.
have an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. And now you can appreciate that it's not just a gas tax. That's why we call it the GRID Act. It's the Government Reform and Transportation Act. This is our opportunity to reform the way we've been operating our transportation and infrastructure, where we can reform it as well as invest in it.
I like that. Jack, thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, and watch for the next one.